Nexus Station never slept. It hung in the darkness between 3 star systems like a jewel made of metal and light. And every hour of every day, thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds moved through its corridors. They came to trade, to negotiate, to make deals that would shape the futures of entire planets. The station was neutral ground, governed by the Merchant Collective, and for 200 years it had operated on one simple principle: commerce above alls. Ambassador Yellen Reyes had called Nexus home for 3 years now. She was a small woman in her 50s, with gray streaking her dark hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She walked through the market district every morning, stopping to chat with vendors, sampling strange fruits from distant worlds, asking after the children of traders she had come to know. Everyone on the station knew her. Everyone liked her. The Lorathi ambassador, a tall being covered in silver scales, often joined her on these walks. His name was Counselor Veth, and he had been humanity's friend since before Reyes was born. This morning, he matched her slow pace through the crowded corridors, his tail swishing gently behind him. "You seem troubled," he observed. Reyes smiled. "Do I? I thought I was hiding it well." "You are. But I have known humans for 60 years. Your species has tales that others miss." She stopped at a fruit stand run by a small furry creature called a Minari. She selected something purple and round, paid twice what it was worth, and took a bite before answering. "The Vrakthy," she said simply. Veth's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of discomfort among his kind. "Ah, yes. They arrived 3 weeks ago, and they have been busy." The Vrakthy were new to this sector of space. They were insectoid beings, standing nearly 7 feet tall, with hard shells the color of dried blood and compound eyes that showed no emotion. They had burst onto the galactic scene with a fleet of 200 warships and an attitude that suggested they believed the universe owed them something. In 3 weeks, they had established a trading post on Nexus, undercut prices on a dozen human contracts, and made it very clear that they considered humanity to be a minor species barely worth acknowledging. Reyes did not mind competition. She did not even mind rudeness. What she minded was what had happened yesterday. A young human merchant named David Chun had been running a small cargo operation out of Nexus for 2 years. He was 24 years old, newly married, trying to build something for his family. He had secured a contract to deliver medical supplies to a colony on the edge of human space. It was not a large contract, but it was honest work. The Vrakthy had intercepted his ship in neutral space. They had claimed he was carrying contraband. They had forced him to open his cargo holds. When they found only medical supplies, they had destroyed them anyway, dumping thousands of credits worth of medicine into the void. Then they had recorded David's face as he watched his livelihood disappear, and they had broadcast that recording across the station's public channels. The message was clear. Humans were weak. Humans could be pushed. Humans would not fight back. Reyes had watched the recording in her office. She had watched it 3 times. Then she had sat very still for a long moment, breathing slowly, before requesting a formal meeting with the Vrakthy trade delegation. "The meeting is this afternoon," she told Veth now. "I would appreciate your presence." The Lorathy's scales shifted again. "Yellen, my friend, I must ask you something. Of course. How angry are you?" Reyes took another bite of her fruit and chewed thoughtfully. "I am not angry," she said finally. "I am disappointed. There's a difference." Veth studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I will attend the meeting, but I will also prepare evacuation protocols for my staff." Reyes raised an eyebrow. "Surely that is premature." "Perhaps, but I have learned that when humans distinguish between anger and disappointment, it is wise to be prepared." The meeting took place in one of Nexus Station's formal diplomatic chambers. It was a circular room with seats arranged in tiers, designed so that dozens of species could observe negotiations without interfering. Today, representatives from 30 different worlds had found reasons to attend. Word had spread quickly through the station's diplomatic community. The Vrakthi delegation arrived first. High Merchant Desik led them, his shell gleaming under the chamber's lights. He was large even by Vrakthi standards, and he moved with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Reyes arrived precisely on time, accompanied by 2 aides and Counselor Veth. She wore a simple gray suit, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked like someone's grandmother attending a business meeting. Desik did not rise when she entered. His compound eyes tracked her movement across the room, and something that might have been amusement crossed his alien features. "Ambassador Reyes," he said, his voice a harsh clicking sound filtered through a translator. "How kind of you to come." "High Merchant Desik." Reyes took her seat across from him. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. I am curious what you hope to accomplish. Your message mentioned the unfortunate incident with the cargo vessel." "Yes." Reyes folded her hands on the table. "I have come to present evidence of what occurred and to request appropriate reparations for the damages suffered by a human citizen." Desik's mandibles clicked in what his translator rendered as laughter. "Reparations. How charming." The medical supplies destroyed were valued at 47,000 credits. The contract that was lost as a result was worth an additional 30,000. I am requesting compensation for both, as well as a formal apology to be broadcast on the same channels where the original recording was shared. Around the chamber, diplomats exchanged glances. The request was reasonable. More than reasonable, actually. It was the absolute minimum that could be asked under the circumstances. Desik leaned forward. "Let me explain something to you, human. The Vrakthi do not apologize. We do not pay reparations. We do not acknowledge the complaints of lesser species." "I see." Reyes's expression did not change. "And you consider humanity a lesser species?" "I consider humanity a small collection of soft-bodied creatures who have somehow convinced other species to be afraid of them. But I have studied your history, Ambassador. I have seen your military capabilities. 12 ships in this sector. 12. His mandibles clicked again. "We have 200. The mathematics are not complex." "No," Reyes agreed. "They are not. So here is what will happen. You will return to your embassy. You will tell your government that the Vrakthi are the new power in this sector. You will accept your place in the hierarchy we are establishing. And if you are very fortunate, we may allow you to continue trading here at all." The chamber was completely silent. Every diplomat present was watching Reyes, waiting to see how humanity would respond to this open humiliation. Reyes sat very still. Her hands remained folded on the table. Her expression remained pleasant, almost serene. "High Merchant Desik," she said quietly, "I am going to ask you one more time. Will you compensate David Chun for his losses and issue a public apology? No. Will you commit to respecting human vessels and citizens going forward? I will commit to treating humans exactly as they deserve to be treated. As a weak species that has somehow forgotten its place." Reyes nodded slowly. She took a breath, held it for a moment, and let it out. Then her fingers tapped the table. Once. A single soft tap that somehow seemed louder than anything else in the room. Counselor Veth stood up immediately. "If you will excuse me," he said, his voice tight. "I have urgent business to attend to." He walked out of the chamber quickly, almost running. Several other diplomats followed, their faces pale, or their scales shifting, or their tendrils writhing with obvious distress. Desik watched them go with confusion. What is this? Where are they going? Reyes smiled. It was a warm smile, the kind of smile a grandmother might give a child who had said something foolish. "High Merchant Desik," she said, "I want you to understand something. I have worked very hard these past 3 years to build relationships on this station. I have exercised patience. I have shown restraint. I have represented my species with dignity and grace." She paused. "Now I am getting irritated." The words hung in the air. Around the chamber, the remaining diplomats began moving toward the exits. Some of them were running. Desic's compound eyes moved, tracking the exodus. What is happening? Why are they leaving? Reyes stood, straightening her jacket. "I suggest you spend the next few days researching that phrase. High Merchant. Ask the older species. The ones who remember the Crullian incident. The ones who were there for the silence of Arcturus. The ones who have learned." "Learned what?" Reyes walked toward the door. She stopped at the threshold and looked back over her shoulder. "That when a human says those words, you run. You do not ask questions. You do not negotiate. You simply run." She smiled again. "Have a pleasant evening, High Merchant." She left. Desic sat alone in the empty chamber, surrounded by abandoned seats and the fading echoes of fleeing footsteps. He did not understand what had just happened. He did not understand why species with no stake in this conflict had fled as if their lives depended on it. But somewhere deep in whatever served the Vrakthy as instinct, something stirred. Something that whispered a warning he was not yet ready to hear. He ignored it. He would learn to Crix was young for a Vrakthy. He had been assigned to the Nexus Station delegation as an attach, which was a polite way of saying he carried documents, scheduled meetings, and listened carefully to everything that happened around him. It was a good position for someone who wanted to learn how the galaxy worked. In the 3 days since High Merchant Desic's meeting with the human ambassador, Crix had learned something very strange. The station had changed. Nothing visible had happened. No announcements had been made. No fleets had arrived. The human embassy remained quiet, its staff going about their normal routines. Ambassador Reyes could still be seen walking through the market district every morning, smiling at vendors, chatting with old friends. But species had begun avoiding Vrakthy merchants. Trade partners who had seemed eager to negotiate were suddenly unavailable. Messages went unanswered. Meetings were cancelled with thin excuses. Crix noticed other things too. Whispered conversations that stopped when he approached. Glances exchanged between diplomats of species that had never agreed on anything. A strange tension in the air that he could not quite identify. On the 3rd day, he decided to investigate. He started with the Larthy embassy. Councillor Veth had been one of the first to leave the diplomatic chamber, and his species was known for their long memories and careful record-keeping. The Larthy receptionist was polite but firm. "Councillor Veth is not available for meetings with Vrakthy representatives at this time. May I ask why?" "You may ask." The receptionist's scales shifted to a color Crix did not recognize. "Whether I answer is another matter. Please. I'm trying to understand what is happening." The receptionist studied him for a long moment. Then she leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Go to the station archives. Search for the phrase your ambassador triggered. Then you will understand why no one will speak to your people." Crix thanked her and left, more confused than ever. The station archives were located in a quiet section of Nexus, far from the busy trading corridors. Crix had never visited them before. He found a terminal in a dusty corner and began his search. He started with the phrase itself. "Now I am getting irritated." The search returned 23 results spanning 200 years of galactic history. Each result was tagged with the same warning label: historical incident, human involvement, extreme caution advised. Crix opened the first file. It described something called the Crullian incident. 47 years ago, a species called the Crullians had attacked a human colony. They had killed 30,000 civilians in what they called a demonstration of strength, intended to force humanity to accept a subordinate position in regional politics. The humans had not responded immediately. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. The Krellians had celebrated their victory. They had broadcast propaganda about human weakness. Then, on the 22nd day, human ships had appeared in the Krellian home system. Not warships, engineering vessels, construction ships, automated platforms. In 6 months, the humans had dismantled every piece of Krellian infrastructure. Not destroyed, dismantled. Stations were taken apart piece by piece. Shipyards were reduced to component materials. Satellites were collected and removed. Communication networks were systematically deactivated. The Krellians themselves were never harmed. Not one civilian was killed. But when the humans finished, the Krellian civilization had been set back 300 years. They still existed today, but they had never recovered their place among the spacefaring species. The file included a transcript from the day before the human response began. An ambassador had met with the Krellian leadership. The conversation had been recorded. At the end of the meeting, the ambassador had said 5 words. "Now I am getting irritated." Crix felt something cold move through him. He opened the next file. The silence of Arcturus. A mining consortium had kidnapped 12 human workers and attempted to ransom them. The humans had paid nothing. Instead, they had waited. Then they had taken action. The consortium had operated from a massive space station orbiting Arcturus 7. 7,000 beings had lived there, representing a dozen species. When the humans finished, the station was empty. Not destroyed, empty. Every single being had been relocated to other facilities. Their contracts terminated, their assets frozen. The station itself was claimed by humanity under salvage laws that had somehow been amended the week before to allow exactly this action. The consortium's leadership had been arrested by their own governments, who had been presented with evidence of 17 different crimes that human intelligence had somehow compiled without anyone noticing. The file included another transcript, another meeting, another calm human voice saying those same 5 words. Crix read file after file. Each story was different in its details, but identical in its structure. Someone had wronged humanity. Someone had assumed that human patience meant weakness. Someone had pushed too far. And then the humans had responded, never with excessive force. Never with cruelty, but with a thoroughness that bordered on terrifying. Every response was perfectly proportionate, perfectly legal, and absolutely devastating. The archives contained analysis from military strategists of a dozen species. They all agreed on one thing: humanity did not wage war like other species. They did not seek to destroy their enemies. They sought to demonstrate, beyond any possible doubt, that attacking humanity was simply not worth the cost. Not because humans were cruel, because they were patient and precise and absolutely relentless. One analyst had written something that stuck with Crix. The humans have a phrase for this. They call it making an example. When you become their example, you discover that human patience is not weakness. It is time spent ensuring that their response is perfect. Crix leaned back from the terminal. His hands were shaking. He thought about the meeting, about Desic's casual dismissal of human concerns, about the destroyed cargo and the humiliated merchant, about the words that Ambassador Reyes had spoken. Then he thought about the 200 Rakthi warships orbiting nearby and the 12 human vessels that had not moved. Suddenly, the mathematics did not seem as simple as Desic had claimed. Crix rushed to find the High Merchant. He found him in the Rakthi embassy, entertaining a group of subordinates with stories about human weakness. "High Merchant," Crix interrupted. "I need to speak with you urgently." Desic's compound eyes turned toward him with obvious annoyance. What is it? I have been researching the humans. The phrase that Ambassador Reyes used. It appears in incident reports going back 200 years. And every time that phrase has been recorded, it was followed by a complete and systematic dismantling of whoever provoked it. High Merchant, these humans are not what they appear to be. Desik clicked his mandibles in dismissal. I have heard the stories. Propaganda spread by species who fear competition. With respect, I do not believe these are stories. The Krellians still exist. We could contact them. We could verify. Enough. Desik's voice hardened. The Vrakthi do not cower before rumors and legends. We have real ships with real weapons. The humans have 12 vessels in this sector. 12. Whatever they may have done in the past, they cannot challenge our fleet. But the other species are cowards who have been fooled by human theater. We will not make the same mistake. Desik turned back to his subordinates. Now leave me. I have actual work to do. Crix left the embassy with a heavy feeling in his chest. He had tried. He had presented the evidence. It had not been enough. He walked through the station corridors, watching the way other species avoided Vrakthi merchants. Watching the way they whispered when they thought no one was listening. Watching the way they looked at the human embassy with something that might have been pity. Not pity for the humans. Pity for everyone else. That night, Crix accessed the recording from the diplomatic meeting. He watched Ambassador Reyes present her evidence. He watched Desik laugh. He watched the phrase that had cleared the chamber of everyone who understood what it meant. He watched it again. And again. He noticed something he had missed before. When Reyes spoke those words, her expression had not changed. Her voice had not risen. She had not made threats or shown anger. She had simply stated a fact. And everyone who knew anything about human history had run for their lives. Crix did not sleep that night. He spent the hours researching, planning, trying to figure out what would happen next. By morning, he had reached a conclusion. The Vrakthi had made a terrible mistake. And unless something changed very quickly, they were about to become the galaxy's next example. 1 week had passed since the diplomatic meeting, and High Merchant Desik had grown more confident with each day. Nothing had happened. The humans had done nothing. Their 12 ships remained stationary. Their embassy remained quiet. Their ambassador continued her morning walks through the market district as if nothing had changed. Desik took this as confirmation of everything he had believed. The humans were weak. Their reputation was built on old stories and exaggeration. When faced with real strength, they folded. He decided it was time to prove this beyond any doubt. The human trading vessel Constellation had been operating out of Nexus Station for several years. It was a small ship with a crew of 12, mostly carrying routine cargo between human colonies. It was unremarkable in every way except one. It was human. Desik ordered his forces to seize it. The operation was quick and efficient. Vrakthi warships surrounded the Constellation as it prepared to depart the station. They broadcast a message accusing the vessel of carrying illegal technology, a charge that was entirely fabricated. Then they boarded the ship and arrested every human aboard. The crew was brought to the Vrakthi embassy on Nexus Station, where they were placed in holding cells. Desik made sure the entire operation was recorded and shared across the station's public channels. Within an hour, Ambassador Reyes requested another meeting. Desik agreed immediately. This was exactly what he wanted. This time, he would have leverage. This time, the humans would have no choice but to accept his demands. The meeting took place in the same diplomatic chamber as before. This time, fewer species sent observers. Those who did attend sat near the exits, their eyes constantly moving toward the doors. Reyes arrived alone. No aides, no allies. Just a middle-aged woman in a gray suit, walking calmly across the chamber to take her seat. Desik spread his claws in a gesture of mock welcome. Ambassador Reyes, how pleasant to see you again. High Merchant Desik. Reyes folded her hands on the table. I understand you have taken 12 of my citizens into custody. Indeed. They were transporting illegal technology, evidence of human espionage against the Vrakthi people. That is not true. It is true enough. Desik leaned forward. But I am a reasonable being. I am willing to overlook this violation in exchange for certain considerations. What considerations? Desik had prepared this moment carefully. He listed his demands: permanent exemption from station tariffs for Vrakthi merchants, priority docking rights at all Nexus facilities, access to human trade routes, and most importantly, a public broadcast in which Ambassador Reyes would acknowledge Vrakthi's superiority in this sector of space. It was humiliation wrapped in legal language. It was designed to break human pride and demonstrate Vrakthi dominance to every watching species. When Desik finished, Reyes remained silent for a long moment. Her expression had not changed throughout his presentation. Her hands remained folded. Her breathing remained steady. And if I decline these terms? She asked quietly. Then your citizens will face Vrakthi justice. Our courts are not known for their mercy toward foreign spies. The word hung in the air. Spies. It was absurd. Everyone in the chamber knew it was absurd. But it did not matter what everyone knew. What mattered was power, and right now, Desik believed he held all of it. Reyes nodded slowly. She unfolded her hands and placed them flat on the table. High Merchant Desik, she said, I want to make sure I understand your position correctly. You are refusing to release innocent human citizens. You are threatening them with false charges and imprisonment. You are attempting to use them as leverage to extract concessions that no legitimate negotiation would ever produce. I am engaging in practical diplomacy, something your species seems to have forgotten. I see. Reyes closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, something had changed. The warmth was gone. What remained was something older, something colder. I am required to ask you one final time, she said. Will you release the crew of the Constellation and allow them to return safely to human space? No. Will you drop the false charges and apologize for this violation of diplomatic norms? Certainly not. Reyes stood. Her movements were slow and deliberate, like someone conserving energy for a marathon they knew was coming. High Merchant Desik, she said, I have been patient. I have been diplomatic. I have followed every rule and protocol that governs relations between civilized species. And I am now forced to conclude that patience and diplomacy will not resolve this situation. She paused. The chamber was completely silent. The observers who remained had stopped breathing. Now I'm getting irritated. Desik laughed. The sound was harsh and clicking through his translator. You said that last time, Ambassador. Nothing happened. Your threats are empty. Reyes smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something he did not. High Merchant, I said those words 1 week ago. Did you truly believe nothing was happening during that week? Did you think we were sitting idle, accepting your insults? Something flickered in Desik's compound eyes. The first hint of uncertainty. We were preparing, Reyes continued. We were positioning assets. We were coordinating with allies. We were building the infrastructure for our response. Because humans do not act in anger, High Merchant. We act in certainty. And it takes time to become certain. She turned toward the door. Wait. Desik's voice had lost some of its confidence. What are you going to do? Reyes looked back over her shoulder. I am going to return to my embassy. I am going to have a cup of tea, and then I am going to watch you discover what happens when you make a human irritated." She walked out. Desik sat alone in the chamber, surrounded by empty seats and silence. Something cold was moving through him now, something he had never felt before. He told himself it was anger. He told himself it was anticipation of victory. He was lying to himself, and somewhere deep inside, he knew it. The first reports arrived 6 hours later. Communication with the Vrakti home system had gone dark. Not destroyed or jammed, just silent. Ships approaching the system were being turned back at the border by vessels that did not appear on any scanner. Desik dismissed this as a technical problem. Then more reports arrived. Vrakti bank accounts across the sector were being frozen. Not by any government action, just by routine verification procedures that somehow all triggered at the same time. Cargo shipments were being delayed by administrative backlogs. Ships were being grounded for safety inspections. Contracts were being terminated due to clauses that no one remembered signing. Nothing illegal was happening. Nothing that could be traced back to any human action. Just 1,000 small problems that were slowly choking Vrakti commerce to death. Desik ordered his fleet to move against the human vessels. 200 warships against 12. The mathematics were simple. The 12 human ships did not flee. They did not even power up their weapons. They simply broadcast a message on all frequencies. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earth Navy. We want to apologize in advance for what is about to happen. Please understand that this is not personal. We simply do not know how to lose." Desik watched from the station as his fleet moved to engage. He watched as the human ships held their position, seemingly helpless. He watched as his commanders reported that victory was moments away. Then the sky tore open. 200 human warships emerged from slipspace in perfect formation. They appeared in positions that should have been impossible, surrounding the Vrakti fleet in a sphere of death. Each human vessel was larger and more heavily armed than anything the Vrakti had ever built. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, not a single Vrakti ship had been destroyed. Every one of them had been disabled. Precision strikes had taken out engines, weapons, and communication systems while leaving life support intact. 200 warships captured without a single death. Desik stared at the viewscreen, unable to process what he was seeing. His entire fleet, the pride of the Vrakti people, had been neutralized in less time than it took to eat a meal. And then Ambassador Reyes appeared on every screen in the sector. She was sitting in her office, holding a cup of tea, wearing the same pleasant expression she always wore. "Hi, Merchant Desik," she said calmly. "The crew of the Constellation is being released to their families as we speak. Your ships will be returned to your people after we have had some conversations with their crews about how this situation developed. Your home system will resume normal operations once we have finished helping your civilians understand the choices their government made." She took a sip of tea. "And as for you, High Merchant, I believe we have a follow-up meeting to schedule. I do hope you can attend." The screen went dark. Desik sat in the silence of his embassy, surrounded by the ashes of everything he had believed about the galaxy. In the span of one afternoon, he had learned a lesson that most species learn the easy way, through stories and warnings, through watching others suffer. He had learned the hard way, and he knew with absolute certainty that his education was not yet complete. 3 weeks after the battle, Crix stood at the viewport of Nexus Station and watched human ships patrol the sector. They moved with the easy confidence of predators who had no natural enemies, their formation precise and unhurried. Everything had changed. The Vrakti embassy was nearly empty now. Most of the delegation had been recalled home. The home was no longer what it had been. The stories coming from the Vrakti system were unlike anything Crix had ever heard. The humans had not conquered them. They had done something far more devastating. They had shown the Vrakthi people the truth. It had started with broadcasts. Someone had gained access to every communication channel in the system, and they had used that access to share information. Evidence of the Vrakthi government's actions at Nexus Station. Recordings of High Merchant Desik laughing about human weakness. Documents showing how the leadership had planned to use violence and intimidation to establish dominance. The Vrakthi people had always believed their government acted in their best interests. Now they knew different. Now they had seen their leaders gambling with their civilization's future, risking everything for pride and power. Protests had erupted on every Vrakthi world. Not violent protests. Something worse. The people had simply stopped cooperating. Workers stayed home. Soldiers refused orders. Officials resigned in shame. The machinery of Vrakthi civilization ground to a halt, not because anyone forced it to, but because no one was willing to keep it running. The human fleet had not fired a single shot. They had simply waited in the system's outer reaches, a silent reminder of what could happen if anyone tried to restore the old order by force. Within 2 weeks, the Vrakthi government had collapsed. New leaders had emerged, chosen by populations that demanded a different approach. These leaders had immediately contacted Ambassador Reyes and asked what humanity required for reconciliation. The answer had surprised everyone. Humanity required nothing. No territory, no resources, no tribute, not even an apology, though one was offered and accepted. The only thing humans asked was that the Vrakthi adopt certain reforms: independent courts, free press, civilian oversight of the military, things that would prevent any future leader from making the same mistakes Desik had made. The Vrakthi people, desperate to avoid whatever the alternative might be, had agreed to everything. Crix had watched all of this unfold with a mixture of horror and fascination. He had tried to warn Desik. He had presented the evidence. He had been ignored. Now he was one of the few Vrakthi remaining on Nexus Station, tasked with helping to rebuild his species' shattered diplomatic presence. It was not an enviable position. One morning, as he walked through the market district, he saw Ambassador Reyes at her usual fruit vendor. She was chatting pleasantly with the Minari merchant, laughing at some joke, looking for all the world like a kind grandmother who had never done anything more dangerous than bake cookies. Crix gathered his courage and approached her. "Ambassador Reyes?" She turned, and for a moment her eyes flickered with recognition. Then she smiled warmly. "Ah, you're the young attach. Crix, isn't it? You remember me?" "I remember everyone who might someday matter." She selected a piece of purple fruit and offered it to him. "You came to the first meeting. You looked worried even then." Crix accepted the fruit but did not eat it. "I tried to warn High Merchant Desik. I showed him the archives. The history. I know." Reyes nodded sympathetically. He did not listen. No. They walked together through the market, an unlikely pair. A tiny human woman and a towering Vrakthi insectoid. Other species watched them pass with obvious curiosity. "I have a question," Crix said finally. "If you are willing to answer it, I will try. How did you do it? Your fleet appeared from nowhere. Your ships were more powerful than anything we had ever seen. Your operation was planned perfectly. But 1 week before, you had only 12 vessels in this sector. Where did everything else come from?" Reyes smiled. "We have been in space for 300 years, Crix. In that time, we have learned a few things about preparation. But the fleet was always there, hidden in places you did not think to look. Our 12 visible ships were never our strength. They were our invitation. A test, if you like, to see who would be foolish enough to attack what they thought was weakness." Crix felt cold. "You were waiting for someone to attack you. We are always waiting. We are always prepared. And we are always hoping that preparation will not be necessary. Reyes stopped walking and turned to face him. Do you know why humans are so patient, Crix? No, because we learned long ago that our anger is dangerous. Not to others, to ourselves. When we act in anger, we make mistakes. We cause more harm than we intend. We create enemies where we might have made friends. She paused. So we built systems to manage our anger. We created protocols. We trained ourselves to wait, to plan, to ensure that when we act with precision. The phrase, Crix said. Now I'm getting irritated. What does it mean? It means we have passed through anger. Anger is hot. It is reactive. It burns out quickly. Reyes' eyes were steady on his. Irritation is different. Irritation is cold. Irritation is methodical. When a human becomes irritated, they have already accepted that action is necessary. They have already begun planning. They are simply informing you that your window for peaceful resolution is closed. Why give any warning at all? Because we do not want to fight. We never want to fight. Every warning is a genuine offer of peace. Every chance to back down is sincere. We take no pleasure in what happens when warnings are ignored. Her voice softened. But we also will not let others mistake our patience for weakness. That lesson must be taught occasionally, or it loses its power. They resumed walking. Crix's mind was spinning with everything he had learned, everything he had witnessed. One question remained. What will happen to High Merchant Desic? He will face a tribunal. Representatives from species harmed by Vrachthy aggression will present their cases. Evidence will be reviewed. Judgment will be rendered. Will he be executed? Reyes looked genuinely surprised by the question. Of course not. Why would we kill him? He kidnapped your citizens. He threatened your people. He humiliated your species. Yes, and now he will spend the rest of his life knowing what his arrogance cost his people. He will watch his civilization rebuild under new leadership. He will be remembered as the fool who almost destroyed everything. That is a far greater punishment than death. They had reached the edge of the market district. Reyes stopped and turned to him one final time. You are young, Crix. You tried to prevent this catastrophe. That tells me something about your character. I think you will do well in the new Vrachthy diplomatic corps. Thank you, Ambassador. One piece of advice. Her eyes were warm but serious. Learn from what happened here. Not just a lesson about human patience, but the deeper lesson. About pride. About the danger of believing you are stronger than you are. About the cost of ignoring warnings. I will. Good. She smiled and began walking away. Then she paused and looked back. Oh, and Crix? The fruit is quite good. You should try it. Crix looked down at the purple fruit still clutched in his hand. He took a bite. It was sweet and refreshing, with a hint of something he could not identify. He watched Ambassador Reyes walk away, a small figure in gray disappearing into the crowds of the station. She looked so ordinary, so harmless. That, he realized, was perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. The humans did not look like apex predators. They did not display their strength or threaten their enemies. They smiled and walked through markets and offered fruit to strangers. And when pushed, they dismantled civilizations without breaking a sweat. Crix finished the fruit and began the long walk back to the Vrachthy embassy. He had work to do. Relationships to rebuild. A future to help shape. But he would never forget the lesson he had learned on Nexus Station. And he would spend the rest of his career making sure his people never forgot it either. Some warnings should not be ignored. Some patience should not be tested. And when a human said they were getting irritated, the only intelligent response was to run. 2 years had passed since the Vrachthy incident. Nexus Station had returned to its normal rhythms. Ships came and went. Merchants haggled over prices. Diplomats negotiated treaties in quiet rooms, while spies watched from the shadows. The galaxy continued to turn, as it always had. But something had changed. Something subtle but permanent. The story of what had happened to the Vrakthi had spread to every corner of known space. It joined the other stories, the ones about the Krellians and the silence of Arcturus and a dozen other incidents. It became part of the collective wisdom that every spacefaring species passed down to the next generation. Do not provoke the humans. Do not mistake their patience for weakness. Do not ignore their warnings. And above all, if a human ever tells you they are getting irritated, run. Crix had risen quickly in the new Vrakthi diplomatic corps. His warnings before the incident, though ignored at the time, had been remembered afterward. The new leadership valued those who could see danger before it arrived. Now he served as the Vrakthi ambassador to Nexus Station. It was a position that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. A young attach, barely out of training, representing his entire species at the most important trading hub in the sector. But these were different times, and different times required different approaches. On this particular morning, Crix was walking through the market district when he noticed something unusual. A new species had arrived at the station. They were tall beings with gray skin and sharp features, moving through the corridors with the confident swagger of those who believed themselves superior to everyone around them. The Korath. Crix had heard of them. They had recently expanded into this sector, their fleet growing rapidly, their ambitions obvious to anyone paying attention. They had a reputation for aggressive negotiation and a tendency to view other species as obstacles to be overcome. Crix watched as a group of Korath approached a human merchant stall. They began examining goods with obvious disdain, making loud comments about human craftsmanship, laughing at prices they considered too high. The merchant, a middle-aged woman with patience worn into the lines of her face, answered their questions politely. She did not rise to their insults. She did not react to their mockery. She simply smiled and waited. The Korath eventually moved on, having purchased nothing and established themselves as superior to everyone in earshot. Or so they believed. Crix approached the merchant after they left. "Are you all right?" She looked up and smiled. "Oh, yes. Thank you for asking. They're new here, aren't they? They arrived yesterday. They seem to believe they are destined to dominate this sector. They usually do." The merchant shrugged. The new ones always think they're different, that the old rules don't apply to them, that the stories are exaggerated. Does it not bother you? Their rudeness? A little. But I've learned that patience is its own reward. Her eyes twinkled with something Crix could not quite identify. And I've learned that some lessons cannot be taught. They can only be experienced. Later that day, Crix attended a diplomatic reception. Ambassador Reyes was there, as she always was at such events, circulating through the crowd with ease. She had become something of a legend on the station. Every species sought her counsel. Every newcomer was warned about the power she represented. She found Crix near the refreshment table and joined him with a warm smile. "Ambassador Crix, you look well." "As do you, Ambassador Reyes. I noticed the Korath have arrived." Reyes sipped her drink. "I noticed that as well. They have been making quite an impression. They seem unaware of certain galactic realities. Most newcomers are. It takes time to learn how things work." Her eyes moved across the room, tracking the Korath delegation as they spoke loudly and laughed at jokes no one else found funny. "I met with their leader this morning, High Commander Vorax. He had some interesting opinions about humanity's place in the regional hierarchy. Let me guess. He believes humans are overrated. Something like that." Reyes smiled. I offered him some advice. The same advice I offered High Merchant Desic 2 years ago. I suggested that aggression against human interests would be unwise. I recommended that he speak with species who have longer memories. I encouraged patience and cooperation. Did he listen? What do you think? Crix looked at the Korath delegation. They were approaching a group of human diplomats now, their body language aggressive, their voices loud. One of them was pointing at a human woman, making some comment that caused his companions to laugh. No, Crix said. He did not listen. No, they rarely do. Riaz finished her drink and set the glass aside. But I have found that some beings cannot learn from words. They need experiences, demonstrations, examples. You're going to make an example of them. I'm going to give them every opportunity to avoid becoming an example. Whether they take those opportunities is entirely up to them. The reception continued. Crix watched the Korath grow bolder with each passing hour. He watched humans endure their insults with quiet dignity. He watched other species exchange knowing glances, the kind of glances shared by those who have seen this story before. A week later, the Korath seized a human colony ship carrying 3,000 civilians. They claimed it had violated Korath space. They demanded tribute in exchange for the passengers' safe return. Crix was in the station's observation lounge when the news arrived. A crowd had gathered to watch the diplomatic channels, where Ambassador Reyes was preparing to address the situation. The Lorathi counselor stood beside Crix, his scales shifting to colors that suggested deep unease. Here we go again, the Lorathi murmured. You think they will ignore her warning? The Korath are proud. They believe their fleet makes them invincible. The Lorathi shook his head. They will learn. They always learn. On the screen, Ambassador Reyes appeared. She was sitting in her office, wearing her usual gray suit, her expression calm and pleasant. High Commander Vorax, she said, I am going to ask you one question. Will you release the passengers of the colony ship Morning Star and allow them to continue their journey? The Korath commander's response was broadcast on a split screen. He was a massive being, his gray skin marked with ritual scars, his voice dripping with contempt. The humans will pay what we demand, or they will never see their people again. This is not a negotiation, Ambassador. This is a demonstration of Korath power. Reyes nodded slowly. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her expression had not changed. But something in her voice shifted, something that made every experienced diplomat in the station tense. High Commander Vorax, she said quietly, I have been patient. I have offered advice. I have given you every opportunity to reconsider your path. She paused. Now I'm getting irritated. The observation lounge erupted in chaos. Species began running for exits. Alarms started sounding in embassies across the station. Ships that had been docked for weeks suddenly requested emergency departure clearance. Crix did not run. He watched the screen as High Commander Vorax laughed at the human ambassador's words. He watched the Korath commander dismiss the warning as empty rhetoric. And he felt something like pity for the Korath. Not much. They had kidnapped 3,000 innocent people. They deserved what was coming. But still, a small part of him wished they had listened. A small part of him wished they had been wise enough to run. They never learn, he murmured. Beside him, the Lorathi counselor sighed. No, but they will. Humanity will teach them, just as they taught the Vrakvi, just as they taught the Krellians, just as they teach everyone who ignores the warning. On the screen, Ambassador Reyes smiled her grandmother's smile and reached for her cup of tea. Somewhere in the sector, human ships were beginning to move, and every species that knew the rule was already running. The Korath would learn soon enough. They all learned eventually. Some lessons could only be taught once. But humanity had infinite patience. and they had all the time in the universe to teach them. One irritated warning at a time.